Beijing residents flee city amidst intensifying restrictions. Despite lockdowns, CCP demands higher GDP growth. Is a hole growing in China's Great Firewall? Calls for a travel warning for China. Heartless treatment of pets. Hello and welcome to Sound of Hope News. I'm Liam O'Neill and today is April 28th. Beijing announced mandatory nucleic acid testing for all 11 of its districts on April 25th. Panic buying for food stocks quickly ensued. Now there are reports of people fleeing the city. Beijing's Chaoyang district was the first to order widespread tests, but in short order testing was ordered for all other districts. At present, only 5 Beijing suburbs are exempt. So, will Beijing be closed altogether? So far, no official word to prepare for such an event, but that may not mean much. Take a look at Shanghai. Just one day before the order to lockdown was given, officials swore that the city would remain open. The sudden closure caught many off guard and has caused an untold amount of hardship, including hunger and untreated medical emergencies. In light of this, many Beijingers believe that the authorities' call for large-scale testing is a precursor to the city's closure. Panic is intensifying. The video here shows people fleeing the city despite police attempts to block.
The
New York Times reports that while most of the world is now responding to the epidemic with open management, the Chinese government continues to rely heavily on strict containment measures, despite the heavy social and economic costs. Despite the dramatic economic downturn due to lockdowns, the CCP is requiring its financial officials to ensure a high degree of economic growth. It specifically wants this year's growth to be higher than that of the United States in order to demonstrate socialism's institutional superiority. In order to stimulate GDP growth, a major infrastructure program with a focus on manufacturing, energy, technology, and food is currently under discussion in Beijing. The U.S. GDP rose 5.5% year-on-year in the fourth quarter of last year, while the official GDP figure in China was a mere 4%. The COVID outbreak and extreme lockdown measures are hitting China's economic system very hard. Outside analysts, therefore, can't make sense of the contradictory call for increasing growth. Economists from Nomura Holdings, for instance, recently released a report pointing out that the Chinese economy is expected to decline further this year, primarily because of the lockdowns. From 4.3 to 3.9%, they predicted. They warned that there is still huge downward pressure on the economy, even if lockdowns were eased. So far, all of Beijing's policies to boost economic growth have had only limited successes. For example, recently the central bank cut the required rate of return, but this has not triggered an investment boom in the market. Economic stimulus measures also seem to be less effective and have dramatically increased government debts. Commentator He Xu told Sound of Hope that the CCP is well aware that China's economic level is not on par with that of developed countries. Economic data have been falsified for a long time, and now Great Leap Forward style economic measures are being used. This is basically a political game being played ahead of the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party, Mr. He had said. Is a hole growing in China's Great Firewall? Well, a new Twitter account is sure attempting to make one. The Twitter handle Great Translation Movement has gained 140,000 followers since its creation in early March. It receives hundreds of translations through Twitter feeds every day and seeks to make the world aware of the CCP's propaganda. According to the account's administrator, there are members worldwide contributing. Most have lived in China and are fluent in Chinese, but for fear of retaliation, keep their identities anonymous. They take posts from Chinese platforms like Weibo and WeChat and then translate them, mostly in English, but also several other languages, including Japanese, Spanish, and Arabic. It seems that the Great Translation movement gained momentum amidst the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Externally, the CCP claimed neutrality, but internally, through official media, it hyped its support for the Russian invasion. The Great Translation movement gave people a glimpse at how the CCP uses its foreign propaganda to glorify itself, while using internal propaganda to, quote, brainwash the masses. After 37 days of isolation, James Zimmerman, that's a former president of the American Chamber of Commerce in China, has advised the U.S. State Department to issue a travel warning for China. This is after he was isolated for 37 days on a recent trip to China. On April 25th, Forbes reported that Zimmerman spent the time in isolation immediately following a heart surgery. He was first isolated in Shanghai for 22 days, then he traveled to Beijing, where the 63-year-old was again forcibly isolated in a hotel, despite his poor health. The isolation room was so small that he could not exercise after the surgery. Food that was brought to him was rotten. The U.S. Embassy even intervened, but could make no progress. Given the lack of transparency in Chinese Communist Party policies, he wrote, it is difficult even for the U.S. government to predict the unpredictable. He also thanked the U.S. Embassy for protesting to the Chinese authorities on his behalf, saying, no one in the Chinese government was willing to take responsibility for my return home and isolation. China has taken strict measures to eradicate COVID-19, with multi-week lockdowns and inhumane methods of curbing coronavirus. One of the less known but brutal aspects of this lockdown is the treatment of pets. Multiple social media posts and videos show that dozens of pets have been caught and tied together in green sacks on the footpaths in Shanghai. One video shows at least 9 transparent sacks bulging with live cats that can all be heard meowing. Although the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention previously reported that the risk of pets spreading COVID-19 to people is low, another video emerged recently displaying a hazmat-wearing health worker patrolling the city streets in Shanghai and beating a corgi to death with a shovel.
哦，要把他打死！哎呦天哪！哎，你这太残忍了吧！
This isn't the first time that animals have been victims in the wake of the zero-tolerance COVID-19 goal. In January, Hong Kong culled about 2,000 hamsters and other small animals for fear of transmission of the virus after one hamster tested positive. The authorities of the northern city of Langfang even issued an order to euthanize all indoor pets belonging to COVID-19 patients. Quote, in order to ensure the safety of positive patients returning home, it is necessary to comprehensively and thoroughly kill the animals domesticated by infected patients as soon as possible. Another bizarre way to stop the spread of viruses was the destruction of a local home garden planted by a COVID-infected patient. Wall Street Silver tweeted a video from Beijing and commented, lockdown, shortage of food. Yeah, this makes sense. They are losing it. That's all for today. Please remember to like and subscribe for more news. Thank you for joining us.